Alright, so before the Friday game between Sporting KC versus Orlando City that is going to be kicking off about an hour at the time of this recording, let's do part 2 of the preview of match week number 2 of the 2021 MLS season. If you guys haven't watched part 1, I'll leave a link in the description below where I look at the game that I mentioned a moment ago that is going to kick off soon between Sporting KC versus Orlando City, and then the 5-day games that's going to be happening on the Saturday action. But for today's part 2, we will look at the last 6 games that is going to be the nightcap of the Saturday action, and then we'll also look at the lone Sunday game, which will be between the Galaxy versus the Red Bulls. Also, I will probably won't do the review right after when the final game on Saturday will finish, because on Saturday night I am going to be doing a Sports Hop series episode, and during that time when I'm doing that video and ground hopping, I won't be able to watch the last 2 games. That is the late nightcap between the Rapids and Austin, and also Portland versus Houston. But I, of course, will watch the highlights once I do come back from that Sports Hop series and come back from my ground hop. And then, of course, I will do the review of the last 6 games that is going to be happening on the Saturday action right before when the game between the Galaxy versus the Red Bulls are going to be kicking off. But with that being said, let us actually begin with the first game of the nightcap. And by the way, there's going to be 4 games this week on Saturday that will kick off right around the same time. So yeah, again, we usually Saturday night, this is when the meat of the action is going to be, although it's going to be a little bit less than what we saw last week, where there was like 5 games that was taking place right around the same time. Although there's going to be time, I think, by the time when the second half of all 4 of these games is going to happen, that's when the Rapids versus Austin game will kick off, and that's when I'm going to have to pretty much try my best to watch 5 games at a time and keep up with all the action that happened in MLS. But the first game of the nightcap will be Atlanta versus the Chicago Fire. Both of these teams have an 0-1-0 record. This game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff time will not start until 8:08 p.m. Atlanta, of course, drew 0-0 against Orlando in the last match, while Chicago, they played to that frenzy 2-2 draw against the New England Revolution at home. Last 5 head-to-head between both of these teams. Chicago has won the last 2 head-to-head meeting, with them winning 2-0 against Atlanta, then winning 5-1 against Atlanta. But Atlanta did win 2-0 against the Chicago Fire, won 2-1 against the Fire, and also won 2-1 on the road against the Chicago Fire. So far, Atlanta, in terms of, if you look at the last 5 head-to-head, they have pretty much won all of the game that is played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But it's going to be interesting to see what they're going to do in this match, knowing the fact that they do have that important CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinal game against the Union. And when I do talk about this game against the Union and Inter Miami, I'll probably repeat what I said right now. The fact that, we're going to see how they will also potentially maybe rest some of their guys for that CCL quarterfinal game. Although technically, I will pretty much repeat the same thing with all of these teams that's going to be involving CCL. And if Atlanta decided to rest some of their guys, this could be a chance for the Fire to potentially get something out of this game. Although one thing that the Fire did struggle last year is that they really struggle whenever they play on the road, and we'll see whether or not if this year is going to be the same, or maybe they can get a point or even get all 3 points in this game against Atlanta team that, we'll see whether or not if they decided to go with a reserve squad, knowing they have a very important game on Wednesday against the Union in the CCL quarterfinal. But moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be Minnesota versus RSL. So the Loons, they have a record of 0-1, while RSL are going to be playing the first game of the season. This game will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Actual kickoff time will be 7:08 p.m. local time. The Loons, of course, we all know what happened last week when they lost 4-0 against the Sounders. While RSL, they are going to be playing their first game this season, as I mentioned, and we're the only team to not play in the opening weekend of the MLS action, because they won the grand old sweepstake of the sweepstake of an MLS team getting a bye week during a match week. Now, in terms of the last 5 head-to-head meeting, Minnesota has really dominated this head-to-head meeting in the last one with them drawing 0-0 in the last match, but then they won 4-0 against RSL. Then it was another 0-0 draw between both of them before Minnesota did win 3-1 against RSL, and then it was a 1-1 draw between them and RSL. And there's no doubt that, you know, in this game, I'm not going to say this is a must-win game for the Loons. I mean, I know there are some Loons fans that feels like this is a must-win game knowing what happened last week, but, you know, we're just only 2 games into the season. I think this is way too early to just say that it is an absolute must-win game, and if it's not a win, then this team could definitely be in trouble. No, I think, you know, even if they do not get anything out of this game, I'm not going to be at that stage that I'm going to be really panicking the fact that this team could underachieve this season. But that being said, this is a game that I think the Loons needs to win to kind of prove that last week game was just kind of a bump in terms of the progression of potentially to be one of the top contender in MLS. And especially they are playing against RSL, which I just mentioned, how they have a very good record against RSL and that they have not lost to RSL since 2016 or 2017 actually. I do fancy the fact that Minnesota does win this game. Now, another thing that I will also watch out in this game is whether or not if RSL is going to give Bobby Wood the debut. As I mentioned before, you know, Bobby Wood was supposed to come to RSL somewhere around June after his time with Hamburg is going to be over, but it seems like now he decided to leave Hamburg early, and Hamburg basically announced that they terminate his contract earlier than expected, and now he is part of this team, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if RSL is going to play him, and if he does end up in the starting 11 or coming off the bench. It's going to be interesting to see how he's going to do in his first ever game in MLS. I mean, there's been a lot of talk throughout the last couple of years of whether or not if Bobby Wood was ever going to come to MLS, and when he does come to MLS, is he going to be a decent player? And we're about to find out when he is now part of RSL, and whether or not if he can rediscover that good form that he had a couple of years ago. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is New England versus DC United. And actually I forgot to put the kickoff of this game, but as I mentioned earlier, all 4 of these games basically kicked off at the same time, as this one will kick off at 8 p.m. or will start at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff will not start until 8:08 p.m. local time. New England, they have an 0-1-0 record after they drew 2-2 against the Chicago Fire. While for DC United, they won 2-1 against NYCFC at home to get their first ever win of the season, and also first ever win for Hernan Losada coaching this team. Last 5 head-to-head between both of these teams. Well, the last time both of these teams played, it was an unexpected high-scoring affair where New England was able to win 4-3 against DC United. Then New England did win on the road against DC by a score of 2-0. Then they also won on the road again, this time by a score of 2-1. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams, and then it was also a 2-2 draw between both of these teams. So yeah, this is going to be an interesting kind of matchup, in that, you know, for New England, this is a chance for them to prove that last year when they really struggle at home, which is kind of weird, the fact that last year, as good as New England was, one of the biggest Achilles heel they had last season was their home form, and that's kind of something that pretty much every team tends to not have. But they get to play against a DC team that, you know, it has to feel good for DC fans, especially for Hernan Losada, to get his first win with this team and really begin the Hernan Losada era off to a good start. But this is going to be a tougher matchup, especially they're playing on the road, which last year they weren't really a good road team, and they're going to be playing against a New England team that hope to kind of brush away their kind of struggle that they had against the Chicago Fire, where, you know, they went down 2-0 early in the game. They did rescue themselves 2 goals to salvage a 2-2 draw, but, you know, in New England perspective, that's probably not good enough in terms of their hope to potentially be one of the top team in the Eastern Conference. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the Union versus Inter Miami. So the Union fresh off of a 0-0 draw against the Columbus Crew, and their record is now 0-1-0, while Inter Miami, they lost 3-2 against the Galaxy away on that last Sunday match, which was also called the Beckham Derby, and their record is now 0-0-1. This game also starts at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Actual kickoff time will be 8:08 p.m. local time. The last two head-to-head meeting between both of these teams, again, this is only the third meeting between both of them, but the last two was the Union, of course, getting a 3-0 win against Inter Miami. Everybody remember that game was the one when Higuain basically blasts that penalty kick over the board, and basically the Union player let him hear about it, and that, you know, Higuain kind of got a little bit salty, the fact that there was some banters that the Union player was throwing at him after he missed that penalty. And then of course the other meeting between both of these teams was in the MLS's back tournament, and the Union was able to win 2-1 against Inter Miami in that one. And again, as I said earlier, for the Union, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if they are going to be rotating their squad a little bit. Now, this is one of the teams that, you know, when you look at them last season, they didn't really rotate their squad a lot last season. I mean, Jim Curtin is a guy that it seems like he tends to stick with the players that he has, and he tends to not really rotate the squad unless if there's injuries that is going to happen. But we shall see whether or not if that's going to be the same thing, or maybe he'll give some of the academy kids a chance in this game against an Inter Miami side that, you know, after the first week, you know, the good news is they did see Gonzalo Higuain score his first goal and get off to a good start to the season, but that was from the penalty spot. And there was time where, when I saw how Higuain played in that game against the Galaxy, there's still signs where, you know, he just doesn't seem like the guy that is worth the $7 million that Inter Miami paid him. And especially when you also look at his work ethics and the way that he kind of treats his teammate, it's definitely not very good when you see it throughout the game. So it'll be interesting to see whether if he can, of course, change that and also continue to score goals for this team. And in some way, he has to continue to score goals for this team, because that's $1 million price tag. You know, it's a big price tag that is over his head, and if he does not live up to his potential again for this upcoming season, this could be one of the worst moves, not only that Inter Miami had made in their short history, but also one of the worst moves we have ever seen in league history. But yeah, that being said, I am now going to switch boards and look at the last 3 games that is going to be happening on this week number 2 of the MLS season. But yeah, moving on in terms of the next match is Austin. So Austin FC is going to be playing their second game in their young club history against the Colorado Rapids in this game. The Rapids, of course, they have an 0-1-0 record after they drew 0-0 to FC Dallas away. While for Austin, you know, despite the fact that they did lose 2-0 to LAFC away in their first ever game in club history, I was actually very impressed the way that they, of course, play in their very first game, as this game will kick off will actually start at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff time will not happen until 7:08 p.m. local time, and this is, of course, the first ever meeting between both of these teams. And, you know, like I said, you know, Austin, I thought in the last game, even with the 2-0 loss against LAFC, they definitely looked like a team that actually had a plan of how to actually be decent and how to actually break teams down. And I mentioned how that's not something that you usually see a lot happening with a team that is playing their very first game in club history. And I actually fancy the fact that Austin could maybe not only get their first ever goal in club history in this game, but they might actually get something out of this game against the Rapids, because I thought the Rapids, you know, in the last game against Dallas, even though, you know, it's a good 0-0 draw against FC Dallas where they got a point on the road, and they didn't necessarily play terribly in that game. They also didn't play anyway like they were last season when they, of course, make it to the playoffs. Now, that being said, you know, last season they were also very good at home, and they pretty much won most of their home games, so that could also be a challenge for Austin. And knowing the fact that this is going to be the first time where Austin will have to play against a team up in elevation, so we'll see whether or not if that intensity that they show in that game against LAFC can kind of continue, because we see a lot of time when team play against the Rapids on the road, they always tend to slow down in the second half because of of the altitude. But again, I really fancy Austin can actually make a couple of history in their club in this game of not only getting their first ever goal, but maybe even get a draw out of this game, or if I am going to be extremely optimistic and said that maybe they can even get their first win against the Rapids, because I know for sure Colorado is not really as good or on the same level as what LAFC was when Austin saw them in their first ever game in club history. But now moving on, in terms of the next match, is going to be the Portland Timbers taking on the Houston Dynamo. So the Timbers, they unfortunately was involved one of the biggest shock resort of the opening weekend, as they lost 1-0 to the Vancouver Whitecaps away, while the Dynamo, they were the team that was involved the first game of the season against the San Jose Earthquakes, which they were able to win 2-1 in that game to improve their record to 1-0-0, while the Timbers, of course, have an 0-1 record. This game kicks off at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific, but the actual kickoff time will not start until 7:38 p.m. local time. Last 5 head-to-head between both of these teams, the Timbers, they did win 2-1 against Houston in the last matchup at Providence Park. Before it was a 4-0 win against the Dynamo at home. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams before the Dynamo did win 4-1 against the Timbers when this matchup was at BBV at Compass Stadium. Then the Timbers also won 2-1 against the Houston Dynamo in the other matchup at Providence Park. Now, as I said before, with many of these CCL teams that is going to be playing a quarterfinal matchup in the middle of the week. The Timbers, I think they might be resting some of their guys in this game, and I know, it's tempted for them to not do it, because, they could start the season 0-2, and that, getting to the start of the season with 2 straight losses isn't really a way for them to potentially be a team that could finish near the top of the Western Conference, and also can really prove my prediction right when I made them as the team that finished at the top of the Western Conference, and that they're going to be playing against a Dynamo team that, yes, they had that impressive victory against the Quakes, but, it's the Quakes. It's when you play against the Quakes on the road, or when you play against the Quakes at home, most of the time you should be able to get all 3 points. And now they're going to be facing against the Timbers team that, they're going to be definitely angry about what happened in last week when they lost 1-0 against Vancouver. But are they going to be angry enough where Savarese decided to roll out the same starting 11, and knowing the fact that there is going to be that big quarterfinal matchup against Copa America, where I think for the Timbers, if they are if they're going to able to win against Copa America and win the aggregate score throughout the both legs against Copa America, they really need their strongest squad, and they really need their strongest squad pretty much in fresh fitness. So I'm assuming maybe the Timbers are going to go with a reserve squad, and if that's the case, this is a chance for the Dynamo to maybe get a win in this game. Although, again, another thing that could go against the Dynamo in this game is they historically have not been a good road team. I mean, the last couple of seasons they have rarely won on the road, and it doesn't matter if they're facing a good team or they're facing a team that I'm assuming in this game might be starting a couple of reserve guys. They still have problems in terms of getting a win or even getting points on the road. But moving on now into the last game of this weekend, which is going to be the lone Sunday game that is going to take place between the LA Galaxy versus the New York Red Bulls, as this game will kick off at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:30 p.m. Pacific, or actually that's the start time for the broadcast, as this game doesn't kick off until 2:55 p.m. local time, and I believe this game is on FS1. The Galaxy, of course, they're fresh off of a 3-2 win on the road against Inter Miami to improve the record to 1-0-0, while the Red Bulls, they did lose 2-1 to Sporting KC at home to pretty much make their record now to be 0-1. And in fact, both of these teams kind of suffer reverse fortune in the first week. The Galaxy, of course, they had that come from behind win against Inter Miami, while for the Red Bulls, they blew that 1-0 lead that they had at home to give up 2 quick goals to Sporting KC to lose 2-1 at home. But the last 5 head-to-head matchup between both of these teams, it was the Red Bulls winning the last matchup between both of these teams by a score of 3-2. But then the very next match, well, actually, the very next match, it was the same score, but this time it was actually happening at Dignity Health Sports Park, and this is also the last meeting that both of these teams have met at Dignity Health Sports Park, as the Red Bulls win 3-2 in that game. Then the Galaxy did win on the road by winning 1-0 against the Red Bulls. Then it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams, and then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. Now, a quick note about this game is that Sebastian Lletget will not be available in this game, and he's actually not going to be available for the next game for the Galaxy too, because, yeah, he made a huge mistake, I think yesterday, when he posted a homophobic slur on his Instagram page, and, you know, obviously he immediately deleted that and immediately kind of apologized to everybody that was a huge mistake that he made. And, you know, as good as that, he did show some remorse in terms of that, and he did kind of apologize in terms of that instant. Yeah, that is definitely not a good look for him, and the league basically punished him by suspending him for 2 matches. Although I know there's some people said that might be kind of a light punishment, and some people would say that he might got away with even a heavier punishment. And that I even hear some people that say that there seems like a conspiracy theory between the league, by knowing the fact that in 2 games time, or in 3 games time, they're going to be playing against LAFC in that El Tráfico. And even though I know Lletget is not a household name in terms of that El Tráfico matchup, he's still a very important player in this Galaxy team. And knowing the fact that when that game has happened, the league want to make sure both of the team don't really have any injuries, or even worse, suspension that could really alter of what would be one of the most hyped matchup of the weekend's action. So therefore, that's why it's only like a 2-game suspension. And that if that El Tráfico didn't happen in 3 games time for the Galaxy, Lletget probably would have got more suspension in terms of that. But either way, he's not going to be playing in this game or in the next game for the Galaxy, and it'll be interesting to see how the Galaxy are going to deal with that. I'm assuming most likely they're going to put Efrain Alvarez in the starting 11 to replace him in that spot, but we'll see whether or not if Alvarez can maybe make the same impact that Lletget has to this team. But either way, this should be an interesting matchup, and in a matchup where, you know, for the Red Bulls, they're looking to try to bounce back after last week, where I didn't think they played very well last week. And if it wasn't for that moment of magic from Caden Clark, they really looked flat last week in terms of going forward. And, you know, they're facing against a Galaxy team that, you know, after what Chicharito did by scoring his first 2 goals of the season, is this maybe a beginning where we're going to see him score more goals? And you know, I'm not going to say that he's going to be a golden boot contender, because, you know, I can't just simply say that he's instantly a golden boot contender after, you know, he had one amazing game where he scored 2 goals. But if he can consistently show that he can bang in the goals and maybe get up to like 10 or 15 goals by the time the middle of the season happen, yeah, I think you could definitely say that he is a golden boot contender. And maybe this is the Chicharito we kind of expected when he arrived to the Galaxy and when he arrived in MLS. But that being said, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of all of these games on this board and also on the previous board. And also, as always, let me know in the comments below your prediction in terms of all 7 of these games. I actually forgot to mention yesterday in my preview to let you guys know. Let me know in the comments below in terms of the prediction for those games that is going to be happening in week number 2 of this season. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.